the writer of several important prose, that is a writer of today we are going to start a new text that's written by the writer. The writer's name is George Orwell. Orwell is the name of a river, and George Orwell is not his real name. His real name is Eric Arthur Blair. Eric Arthur Blair was the writer of many famous novels and poems as well. Not poems, prose as well. And the notable works are 1984, Shooting an Elephant, and Animal Farm, and for which he is famous. For the writing of these two novels, Animal Farm and 1984, our writer George Orwell is famous. And he was born in India. Why? Because his father at that time was working as a civil servant in India. And at that time, our writer George Orwell was born over there. That is the writer of Animal Farm and the writer of The Lion and the Unicorn, Burmese Days, the hanging or shooting of an elephant, etc., etc. Okay, this is our writer George. He is a prose writer, and also he is famous for his writings. And from his early age, George Orwell was gifted with the talent of writing. Talent of writing, that means when he was nearly age 5 years age, then at that time he tried to write something. Okay, and he got himself admitted in a school that is Eton College. Orwell's first published work, the poem "How a Young Man of England," that was printed in Hilley and South Oxfordshire Standard when he was only 11 years old. Unthinkable. For a boy of 11 years old can write this. Actually, the person who will have the talent, they can write so. Okay, and our writer was a talented one, and he wrote this first poem in his 11 years age. Okay. When he got himself admitted in Eton School, then he came into contact with some politicians, especially some political leaders, especially socialist and also liberal thinker, who are quite liberal in their political attitude, and also socialist. At that time, our writer George Orwell got acquaintance in his political understanding, what is socialism and what is liberal thinking in politics. And his father, Richmond Westminster Blair, was a government official, and he was appointed in the most important department of UK. That means at the time UK was the imperial country. That means they had several kingdoms, and that kingdom, it doesn't work actually. And India, especially India, famous for opium department. Yeah, opium, you know, one kind of drugs. There, his father, George Orwell fathers, got appointed as a civil servant of UK. And at that time, our writer was born in India, that is in West Bengal in India, in 25th June 1903. 1903. And Blair, he was brought up like many of the upper middle class society. That means not middle class or lower class. What are you just doing that? Why you have put your hands on your shoulders? And like many of the middle class family members, George Orwell passed his adolescence. Okay, in actually. This is a story of their father. That means in 1986, Orwell's father got acquaintance with British. Thank you, Ravi. British governance, 20 years junior to his father, and also living in India. Okay. And after their marriage, the couple lived in Bengal for 8 years, and where they had 2 children, Marjorie and Eric. Marjorie was born in, and Eric was born in 1903. And after 1 year, after 1 year of our writer's birth, Ida, that means writer's mother, went back to England, and there Eric started his education in England. Eric spent his early boyhood in Hinley, Oxfordshire, enjoyed walks in the Oxfordshire countryside, and he understands his family's need to spend money to keep up appearance and the difference between members of the different social classes. So whenever he had been in London, in Oxfordshire, whenever he had been staying his days in Oxfordshire, he got the acquaintance of several class distinction or class difference. Several classes are there in the society: lower class, middle class, upper class, like that. And at that time, he got a book written by Jonathan Swift, and that title of the book was Gulliver's Travels. And Gulliver's Travels is a political satire. After studying this book, that means the Gulliver Travels, our writer George Orwell started thinking that he will be writing political satire. George Orwell is famous and for his writing, especially for the political satire. 2 of them are famous that are published at the ending period of his life. Our writer was alive only for 46 years. Within this short time, he produced many important literature. Okay. And Orwell wanted to work and wanted to take challenge. And for this reason he thought that he will be working in the British Army. And after getting training in the Biography, he was asked that where you are interested to work on. George Orwell said that I will be working on Burma. And then the other colleague was very much astonished that Burma is a very complicated place. Nothing. So why you are choosing this place? Then our writer George Orwell moved to Burma in 1922, where he served as the assistant superintendent of police. However, whenever he was working in Burma, Orwell didn't like the authoritative tendency of the British government. But he himself is a part of the British government. And he was employed over there as the superintendent, assistant superintendent of police, that means ASP. But he didn't like the imperialistic attitude of UK government when he was working in. And in 1928, Orwell moved to Paris and began a series of low-paying jobs. Low-paying jobs means there is a thing that whenever you will be mixing with the lower class people, then you can understand the true feeling of their life. George Orwell started working in Paris, many low-paid jobs. That means the lower class member of the society. He started to mixing up with that kind of people at that society. And again, he moved to London in 1929 and living in what he termed fairly severe poverty. He left the job in Burmese, went back to Paris, and then went back to England as well. And at the time, he was suffering from extreme poverty. Okay. And whenever anybody will be feeling the poverty, he can understand what's going on towards the lower class people of the society. Our writer also perceived that, and understanding that, he wrote in a novel, and the title of this novel is Down and Out in Paris and London. That means he got the experience of many working class people whenever he had been working in Paris. And if you are not involved with their own lifestyle, that means the working class people's lifestyle, you can understand their true feelings. So our writer George Orwell did so. He went to Paris and started working as a low-paid job, and he got the experience, that means first-hand experience of the lower class people of the society. Then he came back to England and he started working as a school teacher. And there, in Middlesex, most probably, yes, Middlesex, he came down, and at that time, he got the first attacked by pneumonia. Okay, and you may know that at that time many people of the winter-prone country, many people die for the cause of this disease, pneumonia, is it? And our writer got attacked by this disease in pneumonia, and for this reason he had several times got admission in hospital. That means 1938, 1947, and 1950. And in 1933, Orwell wrote that writing, that means the Burmese Days. What he, as I have said, that means Orwell had been working as a deputy or assistant police superintendent of British government, but he didn't like the imperialistic attitude of the UK government. And for this reason, he left the job. Okay, and for his experience, he wrote his writing. That means the Burmese Days. That means what he was observed at the time of working is in Burma. And during this time, he worked part-time in a bookshop where he met his future wife, Ellen O'Shaughnessy. Okay. Most probably I have sent you this slide, all of you. Yeah, have you got this? Okay. So here he met with his wife, future wife. Not he didn't marry at the time. He and Ellen were married in 1936, shortly before he moved to Spain to write newspaper articles about the Spanish Civil War. And a writer's life and experience will be matured if a writer will have so many experience. That means the first-hand experience. Our writer George Orwell had such kind of experience. He had the experience of Burmese days. He had the experience of working in Spain, Paris, and then he has the working as a school teacher in England, and then he has the experience of covering the news of Spanish Civil War. Spanish Civil War, Bengali meaning Griho Juddho. That means the Spanish people had been working towards against the establishment. That means the authoritarian government, the fascist government of Spain were trying to suppress the movement or the revolution towards the government. At the time, our writer George Orwell was covering the news of Spanish Civil War. So these are the experience our writer got in his life. By 1939, Orwell had returned to England, and in 1941, he took a position of the British Broadcasting Corporation, that means the BBC. Okay, again he had got opportunity to another experience working for BBC. BBC, actually BBC, what does BTV do in Bangladesh? BTV is the TV channel that will be broadcasting the government's activities and everything. BBC at that time had been working there. That means BBC will be delivering the government's agenda of the UK. Okay, but with many times George Orwell had been reciting or reading out that news in BBC, but he didn't like all the news. Okay, and he was not happy working in BBC. Okay, actually BBC had been disseminating or delivering the propaganda or the British government. Our writer George Orwell wouldn't like that. In 1943, Orwell took a job more to his liking as the literary editor of Tribune, the Tribune, a newspaper, English newspaper. Okay. And after that, Orwell adopted a son. Orwell and Ellen adopted a son, 1944, and Orwell became a war correspondent of the Observer in Paris and Cologne, Germany. Okay, so at the time, that was the very initial stage. That is the time of the Second World War. Okay, so at the time of the Second World War, UK was involved in the Second World War. In that time, our writer George Orwell was working in BBC. That means BBC will be delivering the positive sides of UK's involvement of the war. And at the time, he also working in the Tribune and the Observer. Always he, that means our writer George Orwell, had been publishing the propaganda of the British government. Okay. But our writer was not quite good in his mind that he will be delivering all these things. And after getting such kind of experience, Ellen, that means George Orwell's wife died in the beginning of that year, that means 44, and just before the publication of one of his most important novels, that is Animal Farm, what we will read in our syllabus, in our course today, in this semester. And despite the loss of his wife and his own battle of poor health, Orwell continued his writing and completed the revision of 1984, another important novel. Look here, 1984, it is written in Italy. So it is the name of another novel written by George Orwell. So these are the two great novels written by our writer George Orwell. One of them is Animal Farm and another is 1984. That was written. Yes. And another Animal Farm. 1984. Orwell remained in 1949, Orwell remarried in 1949 to Sonia Brownell, only a year before his own death of tuberculosis, and he is buried in Churchyard of All Saints, Sutton, Berkshire. Okay, so our writer George Orwell was born in India when his father has been working for the British company. Okay, and after our writer's birth, his mother took Orwell in England. There Orwell got acquaintance in his education, and at the time of Eton School he was getting contact to several socialist and liberalist thinkers. As a profession, he wanted a job in Burmese police administration, and he served over there as an assistant superintendent of police in Burma. Okay. Next time he went to Paris, and there he did many low-paid jobs. Again he returned back to London, and he started working in a school. Okay. At the time he started working in BBC, that means British Broadcasting Corporation, during the time of the Second World War, and then he started working about the editor of Tribune, the Observer, and also he was a correspondent of Spanish Civil War. So our writer, from his early age, he was gifted with the talent of writing literature. Okay. And apart from that, Orwell said that it is not necessary for me to write literature, and my motive of writing literature is to discover the truth. If there are no lie in our society, I wouldn't write. So the motive of George Orwell writing to discover the true things, and getting experience of several portion of his life, he wrote several novels. That means down and out town in Paris and London. That means his experience of working in Paris and London. Then the Burmese days, another experience of living in Burma. And also he was inspired by Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels is a political satire, and the important novels written by our writers, George Orwell, that is Animal Farm and 1984, these are the political satires. So that is our important writer, that is George Orwell.